Alright, after like 4 tests of trying to get my mic to work, finally at it. This video is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be anything, as much as the title may give a very heavy video, it is and it isn't. I'm going to try and be positive as much as I can, talking about something that's very, been hindering on my life for the past few years. And now I'm in a relatively okay space to the point where I don't always feel like I'm drowning in it anymore. That's the reason why I'm making a video about it now. There's been many times where I've wanted to make a video about it, but I'm still very not doing great with it. I am now in a headspace now where I'm doing really well with it. I'm in really good therapy that's been helping immensely with it. I have a great support system with it. That I finally am kind of in a space where I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of okay to talk about it. Of course, with the nature of this disorder, I'm not gonna go into too much detail about what has happened to me in specifics, mainly due to the fact, one, it'll cause drama, and I don't need that, and it's just something I don't want to have out. I'm still don't hide or shy away from that fact, but going into details, I'm just not going to, for those specific reasons, for my own safety and for my own peace of mind, and I'm allowed to have that privacy. Despite the internet having this weird idea of wanting to basically get to the nitty-gritty of everything. I don't like that. I don't want that. Just to give a little disclaimer, so yeah, it's too harmful, too triggering. It's not something I particularly would like to have as like a spotlight thing. There was definitely a time when that was kind of different, and if you've been following me for a long time, you may have noticed that. Ultimately, I decided against it due to the fact that there was nothing, it was not going to change anything whether or not I made my story public or not, because if I had made my story public, it would have caused a lot more issues, and I chose not to for that reason. Just to give a bit of context. I'm just mainly going to talk about, instead of talking directly and by telling my story, I will be talking about the side effects, and the big side effect of what happened to me was developing CPTSD. Now, what is CPTSD, and what is the difference between CPTSD and regular PTSD? So, if you don't know what PTSD is post-traumatic stress. It is a disorder that is very commonly associated with being a part of the military. So you'll see a lot of veterans and a lot of people who are in the military having panic attacks, or if you've or like having flashbacks. It's very commonly associated with that, but you can get PTSD from multiple different things. You can get them from, what's the term I'm looking for? Traumatic injuries or near-death experiences. You can get PTSD from other traumatic events. You can get PTSD from a lot of things. But then there's also CPTSD, and that is from repeated trauma. So if you grew up in an abusive household, or if that sort of thing, you grew up with childhood trauma, or in my case, if you were in an abusive relationship for a few years, which I was. And that's how it ended up becoming CPTSD, because there's many different events that have been very traumatic throughout that time period. And there is a few, and that is the main difference between the two, is that usually PTSD comes from one event, whereas CPTSD can come from multiple and from a repeated trauma cycle of being stuck in a situation. Even bullying can be counted into that. And another thing about PTSD that a lot of people don't know about is the fact that if you have had multiple different bits of trauma, despite the obvious main thing that caused it, is that it kind of soaks things up like a sponge, and those things also become very traumatic, which has happened with me. I unfortunately have a lot of other things that have happened that were not so great, not so nice. And so, for example, bullying situations and that sort of thing. Like, I remember I was reading a book, and in that book there was something that had brought something up from my past from when I was about 14, and I got very upset, and I was having a flashback. And I'm like, this is so weird, because I wouldn't think I was having a flashback over this. I don't usually have flashbacks of this at all. But that's just a thing that with PTSD that you may not know. Which, speaking of, we'll go into flashbacks. Flashbacks are a very classic sign of PTSD. There is different types of flashbacks. Most of mine are quite visual, sometimes auditory, in the sense that like, I'll just remember something that was said, or I'll see it happening, and that sort of thing. And usually when I have flashbacks, it's not always the classic that you see in movies of, oh, I need to leave or whatever. Sometimes flashbacks can just be like, oh yeah, I remember that, and then like go about my day. Or sometimes it's, oh fuck, I forgot about that. Okay. And then continue on about my day. Sometimes flashbacks show up in dreams, and usually those ones are not very nice, from my own experience. And then you have emotional flashbacks, which are low-key kind of terrifying, where you just remember, like, you feel all the feelings that you felt, and you just feel them all over again. There's no specific memory or whatever. You just feel all those emotions, and those are terrifying. They're not very fun. They're quite scary. And I've experienced those a few times, and they're not fun. They're very not fun. They're very, very scary, and I didn't, I mean, who enjoys flashbacks? No one, but like, those ones in particular, I would find the worst, because oftentimes they kind of feel like a panic attack, but they're not. I don't know how else to describe them, but yeah, they're not fun. But oftentimes when I mention I have PTSD, it's something that I don't necessarily hide it, mainly because there's a stigma around it. I find that, hold on, I need to let my dog in. That there's often a stigma that, like, people with PTSD are, at least I find, I don't know if anyone else who has PTSD feels the same way, it's either I'm too young to experience it, or if I'm experiencing PTSD, it's I need to be protected, or I'm a little sensitive snowflake because something could set me off or whatever. And that's not necessarily at all the case. For first off, anyone can experience PTSD, and I mean anybody can experience PTSD, or have PTSD, not experience it, but can have PTSD. Whether that be CPTSD or just regular PTSD, it's valid. When it comes to I forget what I was saying. Fuck. When it comes to what I was saying earlier about people thinking they're like this little snowflake that can set you off, because there's always that, I guess, stereotype or whatever of PTSD. I think one thing that people don't realize is that, from other people I've met with PTSD, is that there's a lot of laughing involved at our trauma or making jokes. I make a lot of jokes about it, about what has happened to me, mainly because, one, I've cried enough about it that, like, and at this point I'm like, if I don't laugh about it, I'll cry. And it's my way of coping with it. So, I'll joke about stuff that is very, very traumatic, and people who aren't traumatized like me would look at it and be like, and be kind of uncomfortable. But if you're, but like, it's how I cope with my situation, and especially with other people with PTSD, it's a very common thing, and it's relatively healthy. I say relatively because there is a point where it can get unhealthy, which I have crossed that line. But now I'm at a point where it's just, if I'm having a flashback or whatever, I'll make jokes at times about my situation, and if you're friends with me, you know all about it. There's definitely days when I'm really bad with my PTSD. And usually in those days, it can be a combination of a lot of things. Again, it could be emotional flashback, which are awful and terrifying. Another thing that I deal with chronically is disassociation. I deal with it constantly, and it sucks. Because oftentimes it kind of gets to a point where I often feel like I'm a ghost and I'm not really alive, and I often feel like anything that has ever happened to me just did not happen, and it's some weird third person's trauma. It's very strange in that way, and I can never really explain dissociation to a lot of people, because oftentimes it is, the best way I can kind of describe it is your computer going in and out of sleep mode. It's essentially my brain. It's my brain's kind of constantly going in and out of sleep mode, where I'm there and then I'm not there, and then I'm there and then I'm not there. And where my brain is, I don't really know. Sometimes it's in a void, sometimes it's in a memory, sometimes it's, I don't even know what my brain is thinking at times. It just feels like my brain is constantly like stuck on certain tabs, and there's times where like I'm on a certain tab and there's another tab in the background of everyone else talking, and I can hear it, but I'm so focused on my own tab, I don't even know where all that is coming from at times. And that's one thing that sucks. Another thing with dissociation is that at times, when I'm in a state of dissociation, I don't feel a lot of emotions. That could be the medication that I'm on, but oftentimes I do feel it is dissociation and I don't really feel anything. Sometimes I just feel really sad, and everything feels really heavy. I don't want to get out of bed, that sort of thing. Or I just feel hopeless and just helpless and I feel like I can't do anything. But a lot of the times I'm just very confused and a bit disorientated, and I kind of don't know what's going on for days. And then by that time, when it comes to my productivity or working on things, it's just gone completely downhill. And whatever I'm working on, like, I can't even work on things, I can't even concentrate. Which is not great being in college, but it's not fun. Another thing is also impaired decision making. Sometimes it's dissociation is like tunnel vision, and sometimes I feel emotions and I make stupid impulse decisions. One of those was making a stupid fucking YouTube video that I thought was fine until I came out of my dissociative episode and was like, that was a stupid fucking idea, and I took the video down. And even at the start of that video, I said, I'm pretty sure I'm disassociating. I probably shouldn't be making a video right now if I'm disassociating. But I still did it anyway. Because that's another thing also I find with dissociating is making stupid impulse rash decisions. And that leads into my impulse buying, which is really bad. I'm admittedly trying to get better with it, but I have really bad impulse buying, and it got significantly worse after my traumatic incidents and after my PTSD had sprouted up. And it's still something I'm trying to get under control, but if I'm disassociating, that's out the window. And it's buying to feel something, and it's not good. But I'm kind of constantly in and out of that. And my dissociation at this point now is not what it used to be. It is more just me confused and like, what the fuck's going on? The last time I was dissociating was just confusion and just being relatively sad. Although I do believe it was also a little bit of a depressive episode, a little bit as well. And a little bit of burnout. So I think that's what was going on. So I think it was just a combination of a few issues. But yeah. Another thing with PTSD that a lot of people don't understand is the rage and the anger. I was very angry for about a good year after what had happened to me. And I mean, I was very angry. And rightfully so, but I don't think anyone's ever seen me so angry in my life. And in a lot of ways, I wish a lot of people didn't see me that angry, but at that point, there was no stopping it. It was very uncontrollable. I constantly feel like I had some sort of vial of rage bubbling in my stomach the entire time, and in my chest, constantly. Not to mention, at the time I worked in fast food. I don't anymore, but at that time I did. I don't like thinking about that part of my life because I was so angry, and I'm at a point now where my anger is very settled. I'm definitely not as angry as I used to be, but for a while I was very angry. And I mean very angry. I don't think I was so angry I punched a wall in work. That's how much rage was building up. And PTSD rage is something that's very it's very scary, and especially for a lot of people who know me, that I'm not a very angry person, and when I am angry, there's usually a reason for that. And so people see me violently angry for no reason. It's very it was very telling. I was going through some stuff, and I don't like thinking about it at times because it's embarrassing. But another thing I just try to tell myself is that like I was quite sick at that point. I was very sick. And I was in not a good headspace. I was very sick that I was having auditory and I was having some visual hallucinations. That's how bad it was at that point. But that was at the very, very start of my PTSD manifesting. So that was in like the first like 1 to 4 months that I was having auditory and visual hallucinations. I haven't experienced them since. So yeah, they were very stress induced. I was either experiencing hearing voices or I was hearing I was having mad paranoia, and I was experiencing shadowy figures following me home from work, which were terrifying. I have not experienced any of those since. Thank God. The paranoia at times is if I'm in a really bad headspace and the paranoia is going off. Yeah, it's kind of a warning sign for a lot of the people around me. But I've only had that once or twice since. Right now, it's not really. I haven't really been set off really at all. A little bit maybe, but definitely nothing like it was before, where I was like locking my bedroom door at night, that sort of stuff, because I was terrified. Or there was times where I wanted to hide in my work bathroom. So like there was definitely a lot of things that were going on that were very clear indicators that I was mentally very unwell. I'm now at a point where I don't really experience those anymore, and if I am, it's usually because I'm going through a pretty bad episode, which, speaking of, a lot of my PTSD episodes are such a mix of either flashbacks, rage, or dissociation. And and usually when a PTSD episode comes up, it's either something has happened that brings up a lot of those feelings. Sometimes it's watching a movie or TV show with some of my triggers in it. For example, if anything, like for example, there's Incarnation Street right now, if anyone's watching at the moment. Yes, I know I don't give a fuck, alright? Things like Carnation Street and Everdale I fucking love, okay? I don't give a fuck. I don't like EastEnders or Fair City though. They suck. But if you guys have been watching those, if you guys remember Tom and Belle's storyline from Emmerdale, or right now with Todd and I forget his boyfriend's name. But those two relationships, they were quite triggering for me, so I couldn't really watch those. Things like Baby Reindeer, but that was very, very prominent. I couldn't watch that either. There was so like things like showing abusive relationships I can't really watch. Or I don't go to certain places. And there's certain things I kind of had to get over. For example, like there were some PTSD triggers that were quite. There was kind of no getting around them. I had to. For example, going to college, I had to use the same train that I used to see my abuser on every day, and I had to use the same train because I was still going to college. and terrified of running into them, and I did at one point, and I had told them to move away from me. I hadn't seen them since. Um, but uh, I'm experiencing a little bit of dissociation, a little bit. I'm gonna keep them in though, just because it is a video talking about dissociation, but there's or talking about PTSD and stuff like that, and dissociation and stuff like that. Um, but it just kind of reminded me that another thing about dissociation that a lot of people don't realize is sometimes I kind of describe it as my brain short circuiting, and nothing's going through my head. It's just complete blankness, kind of like you guys know in Marvel. You know the scene in Spider-Man No Way Home where fucking Doctor Strange knocks Peter Parker soul out of his body? That's exactly what it's like. That's what it's like. Um, and I'm like, oh my god, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I'm trying, and I can't. And it's really hard sometimes when my brain's like that because I feel like at times my people around me don't know what that is, and they fear that I'm like having some sort of seizure or something, which I'm not. I have a friend who has epilepsy, so it's not that I'm being like dismissive or anything. I know things about absence seizures, but it's not like an absence seizure at all. I, you know, because I'm worried people think that that's like some sort of like, um, me being insensitive or not using the right terminology, that sort of thing. Um, because even when I was first talking to them about it, they're like, "Are you sure it's not an absence seizure?" And then I had a video of me disassociating that I had caught on camera, and I had showed them to them, and they were like, "No, yeah, you're disassociating, and that's dissociation, and it's bad." And I was like, "Yeah, it can get quite bad at that point." Um, and specifically at that time, I was going through some really hard stuff, so like it was quite bad. But when I'm having a really bad dissociation episode and I have it in front of somebody, it's quite embarrassing because people tend to freak out and not know what's going on. And at that point, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm trying to bring myself back, to my body and trying to understand what the hell's going on because half the time I don't know what's going on and I'm freaking out. But I'm also like, oh, it's hard to explain. It's very, very hard to explain. If I can find that old video of, because I might still have it. I don't know. Um, if me disassociating, I will have it playing here to kind of illustrate what the hell's going on. Me, because apparently I can't make my own fucking choices as a 22-year-old. Um, I know I may not look it, but I am 22. I get that a lot. Everyone's like, "Wait, what? You're like 22? You're not 16?" Crazy. um, but it's yeah, it's a lot. Um, Um, it's almost like spacing out, but it's not. It's weird because you can kind of tell that I am trying to get back to my body, but I can't. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it very well. But yeah. And by the way, dissociation is not just a PTSD thing, but it is very heavily commonly associated with PTSD. But there's many other types of disorders that you can experience dissociation in, and it's not exclusive to things like DID, and it's not but it is way more common and a more daily thing with things like DID and of course things like CPTSD. But for example, people with ADHD or I believe depression and a few other conditions, you can also experience dissociation. And just to give like a bit of frame of reference, but yeah, it sucks at that point, you know, because you're trying to like, because I don't know. I think it's just for me being a people pleaser, I try to make myself a little bit digestible, and sometimes when I'm showing symptoms of my mental illnesses, I try to be digestible as possible. Or, well, not mental illnesses, but, well, yeah, mental illness and my mental health conditions. That, I try to make myself digestible as much as possible. But if this was to be, say, if it was something like, I don't know, like my asthma or my hypermobility, or if it was someone else in my shoes, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that because you can't help when those sorts of things are like that. You know what I mean? And at that point, you just kind of need to make room, I guess, instead of trying to push away those sorts of symptoms, because you can't look at symptoms. They're just things that happen, and you kind of just need to make room for them. While also trying to make them better, but not try to push them down or hide them, which is my biggest thing. I do try hiding them at times, mainly just out of shame, and I don't like asking for help. And the thing is, you need to ask for help, and that was a big lesson I had to learn. Especially because I've not been the same person since my PTSD has manifested, but I've also have been able to manage it relatively well over the past few months now. I've been doing relatively well, and so that's why I decided to make a video about it and talk about it. It's quite a long video, but I don't really care. But yeah. But yeah, no, this is just a really off-candid video that I decided to make to kind of talk about it. Especially because I just kind of want to bring the stigma around PTSD kind of down, and also just kind of discuss it, because it has become quite a big part of my life, and it impairs my function from day-to-day life, and it is something I deal with constantly. But with that being said, it is still something that I've learned to conquer in a lot of ways. So it's not always doom and gloom. I have been doing quite well over the past while. with it. So yeah. Um I really have nothing else more to say about it. But yeah, very off-candid video. And if you're still watching this long, I thank you for that. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Do you